going to go back over some of the stuff we talked about yesterday, but mostly talking about the narrative, the grand story, like why we listen to it, why it has such a big impact, and kind of where it's from. Okay, um, so I've been thinking about this morning. I was walking the dog, how to best explain the kind of the grand narrative. And the main thing to think about with the grand narrative is that it's an emphasis on an aspect of the human experience as the whole of human experience. And how did that happen? Why is that such a big deal? All right, so let me try to think about how to best do this. Okay, so we got the marker that works. See if that works. Nope. All right, let's try this. Okay. All right, so let's see. I was thinking, let's do this. Let's do told. Told, taught. Experience. Okay, so this is experience. Okay, this is what we're told. This is what we're taught. So we'll try starting it this way. Okay, so the way I was thinking about it as I was walking, and how to kind of break all this down is what happened when we evolved, and in Western society, it's important to distinguish this Western society aspect. But in Western society, a really significant moment that showed up for kind of the human, the Western mind, was the notion of enlightenment. The notion of enlightenment. Okay, so this moment in time really created a massive impact on what we perceived as our abilities as human beings to do things. Okay, so enlightenment, you've got Descartes. That's I think, therefore I am. You got Rousseau, Locke. All right, so just think about it like this. This part right here, I think, therefore I am, that positioned the mind, the individual mind, as far more valuable than it was positioned before. Now think about this. Before enlightenment, you were told, pretty heavy. You were told what to think, you were told what to do, you were told what was going to happen to you if you thought and did those types of things. So this is very much kind of religion. And there wasn't a whole lot of your individual mind here. So you were heavily told. Okay. Now with enlightenment comes more of this, what you're taught. So with religion and before enlightenment, you were told how to think about things, how to do things, um, just what was waiting for you, what position of life that you were in. I mean, just think about the structures of power before the Enlightenment. It was families, right? You could not be anything more than your station. Just the way it was. You just had, and not only was it the way it was, there wasn't any choice in the matter. There wasn't an alternative. There was simply the reality and what you were told to do, and you just had to do it. And that was just part of the human experience for a really long time. So then enlightenment happens, and then what we're taught and what we can teach ourselves starts to increase. Okay. Now, as it's increasing, okay, we have government. Okay. As this is increasing, told starts to become governments. Okay. So this is state actors. Okay, government, state actors. And as time goes on, as time goes on in terms of the government and state, and then what we are taught, we get to the kind of the United States experience, the U.S. The USA experience. Now, inside of the USA experience is a government or a state actor or the state apparatus. And in anthropology, they call this an ideological state apparatus, or the ISA. Okay. So this combination between taught and told, okay, turns into this. And what's unique about this is that this makes, in the modern world, what religion made in the kind of the old world obvious. Obvious. Okay. So ISA creates a sense of obvious. Okay. So it's an obvious kind of thing. It's not something that you question. It's more of a something. It's more of a, is it or is it not? It's either between this or it's between that. In the conversation yesterday, the notion of racism or systemic racism is a taught thing. It's not something that's just obvious. It's not obvious to children that there's any difference between a black-skinned person and a white-skinned person. That's irrelevant. This stuff is taught. And part of what's taught is through an ideological state apparatus, which facilitates this obvious thing. That's what I was talking about yesterday when my mind was kind of going towards this thought process of what's the obvious thing, what's obvious, and with racism, and it's not easy to recognize this. Okay, so we got enlightenment, we've got told, we've got taught. Now this part here is experience. Okay, now I really want to put this here. This is really important. World War II. All right. So in World War II, all these things came together in a win. Big win. World War II, massive win. So inside this massive win, we got a clear indicator of the success of our thinking. Okay, that's all this stuff. And the success of our government or our way of life, the American way of life. Okay, so we got our thinking and our way of life. So what has happened is that this, what are told, shifted from religion to government. Okay, government supported and built off of this. Okay, and then what we experienced as a kind of a massive kind of nationwide coming together, World War II proved, in essence, that the mind, the state, and the experience could result in this massive win, this massive World War II win. So after World War II, what we got was a heavy amount of kind of this type of way of thinking, this way of emphasizing the mind, and teaching people to essentially recreate all the things that made World War II possible. And so part of what made World War II possible and the success of World War II possible is the way we industrialized and organized. And so part of what industrialization and organization does is it facilitates this relationship to the mind, which is heavy past future. All right, so we got success in WW2 really creates American mind. And what's so important to understand about the American mind is past future. Past future is the American mind, okay? Past future is industrialization. Past future is we have this much, we've got to get this much, what do we have to do? So it's a constant analysis of past and future. It's constant, okay? So this really solidified mind. And then over time, what happened to the rest of us, okay? So over time, the American mind worked its way out of religion. You know, if I'm a very kind of mind-oriented, very kind of numbers person, you know, if I'm really thinking about past, future, and I read the Bible or I participate with religion, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be a narrative of that doesn't make sense if I emphasize this mind element. Okay, so that's just going to happen. It's just a matter of time and engagement. And as religion has kind of sunk a little bit in the value of the American mind, then this notion becomes that much more kind of a big deal. Okay, so what we are dealing with the grand narrative, and this is just this is how I explain it for myself, and really how we got here is less important than what it means to be here and understand being here. So what we've got this emphasis on mind, and you can kind of see it in the way we have created ourselves big tech. The way that we have Facebook, the way that we have social media, the way that everything is very ordered and structured, and we've got all this kind of intellectual stuff, right? That we're able to kind of experience, and the mind can now experience just more awe and wonder. You can literally sit still and stick something on top of your head, and then have your mind perceive that you're in this new place, and da 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 da. So that's how the mind, in a sense, got really, really big in our American culture. Now, here's what you need to be thinking about in terms of the mind. And this is what we brought up yesterday. In the human experience, there's the mind, the body, and the mystery. Okay? So it's not just mind. You have to account for body, and you also have to account for the mystery. In the past, this was religion, and the mystery had most of the authority. Okay? Now, you could argue that before religion, it was the body, right? So this is ancient Rome. This is ancient Rome. This is before Greece, right? So before Greece, so this is kind of Greece to Enlightenment. This is Western. This is ancient Rome. Ancient Rome facilitated all this body stuff, right? When we got into religion, the body was sin. Okay, so at kind of each kind of epoch of the human experience, we went through different relationships. So this is kind of hedonism, do whatever you want, if you had wealth, if you had power, just do whatever you wanted to. Religion really shifted that. So religion, pretty much, really Christianity. Jesus. Okay. And then we get the mind up here. So when the mind hit, this started to decline. Religion started to decline, and the way the Western mind interacted with the body was to see it as weakness. And that's really World War II. Weakness. And the reason why I say that about World War II and weakness is because the cultural norms of kind of the American warrior after World War II is what we're experiencing now, which is the no pain, no gain, put the mission first, just ignore your emotions, all that kind of stuff. So it's another way of thinking about where we got the mind. So there's your mind. But the thing is, you have to account for body, and you have to account for the unknown. So once you get to the reality that you have a grand narrative, right? And there's lots of different ways to explain where the grand narrative came from. We could talk about ego with Freud. We can talk about the psyche with Jung. There's lots of ways to get to this kind of explanation. And even if you understand it in one way or another, it really doesn't matter that much how much you understand where we got to. I mean, mostly it's just like whether or not you think I'm full of shit or not. But what really matters is that you are experiencing a human experience with the potential for experience in the realms of mind, body, and what's beyond your awareness. You have that ability. You have the ability to experience the mind, the body, and the unknown. You have that ability. That is what's the most important part. Now, you have an overemphasis through your society and through your country and through your culture on your mind, but you are not your mind. Now, a lot of people experience this by going heavy into the body, okay? So you go heavy into the body and, you just move out of mind altogether, right? There's an overemphasis on mind. So that's really kind of addiction. Okay? That's really what happens when you kind of get stuck in addiction. The unknown. You get stuck in the unknown, that's conspiracies. Conspiracy stuff. Okay? So this is kind of the abnormal. And then stuck in the mind is anxiety, depression. Okay? So what happens when you get overwhelmed in any of these kinds of things is these are the kind of the ways that all these aspects of your human experience can kind of become faulty or kind of messed up, right? But if you get the balance, again. If you can find the balance here, you can start to realize that you're not the mind. Or the body. You are the awareness. So you're this. You're just awareness. Now, awareness is radiant emptiness. Radiant. Awareness is radiant emptiness. So it's active and empty at the same time. So if you are active and empty at the same time, then the mind will show up as past, future stuff. Past, future stuff, identity stuff. The body will show up as present moment experience and all that entails. And the mystery, well, that's the adventure of life. So that's where the mind came from is where I described it. It's not just mind, it's the Western mind. And it's that grand narrative, which we were talking about in the context of racism. And the Western mind is very much organized to be racist. I mean, that's kind of It's kind of the thing we're fighting. And part of the reason why it's organized to be racist is because it's hierarchical. And part of the reason why it's hierarchical is because that's one way to kind of get maximum productivity out of kind of anything, really. You order it in terms of its relation to the outcome or the goal. You situate what's gets you closer to the goal, which doesn't, blah, 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 blah. But that's kind of where we're at. So we're not just dealing with, some little kind of thing. We're dealing with some fundamental issues here. So that's kind of the mind. The body, right? The body has largely been ignored by the Western mind. The body has been seen as just a kind of a limitation to be overcome, right? That's no good. And then the mystery, right? The mystery is the adventure. What comes next? How's this going to all work out? Who knows? So anyway, this is what we've kind of got. But the thing that's so important, and this is where the practice comes in, is that you're not your mind and you're not your body, and you don't have any control over this. This mystery is kind of like, I don't know, what are you going to do? So what do you need to do? How do you deal with this? Well, so mindfulness, okay, equals mind, body, experience. Mindfulness is the circle. So mindfulness is this. Mindfulness is the study of the awareness of the mind, the body, and the spirit or the unknown. That equals mindfulness. Soft power equals this skillfully. See? So mindfulness is simply the recognition of the awareness. So the awareness or the radiant or radiant emptiness. Okay? And so you start to recognize that you can be aware of the mind doing its thing, the body doing its thing, and you can become more skillful with the unknown. So that's kind of how I perceive where the grand narrative came from, which, there's a lot of ways to explain where the grand narrative came from, and there's a lot of intellectually organized and rigorously researched ways of thinking about where the grand narrative came from. So, don't take what I have offered as an explanation with, too much value or excitement. It's just me kind of spitballing. So that's kind of one thing. But what you do need to understand, and there's no getting around this, and you can be taught what this is, but you can't do anything about it intellectually. It's not something that is an analysis that you can work your way through. It is an experience that you become better and better at experiencing. So it's very much an embodied, in the moment kind of thing. And that's where the practice comes in. So I've taken up 30 minutes of just kind of talking the way to kind of connect, right? We got to use language to connect to this stuff. And, just for the way of kind of making the connection, right? So that you see that there's more to this than just someone saying, do this or do that, right? You start to recognize that this stuff is got, some historical elements to it that we have to notice. And part of the reason you notice them is really that it just tames your mind, right? So a big chunk of all this intellectual stuff is to just tame the mind. I mean, your mind is a powerful, powerful thing, right? When they say the mind can do anything, it's not, that's not BS, right? But a big chunk of the mind is the mind has got to get out of the way. The mind has to get out of the way in order for you to kind of get a clear indication of the present moment. So you have to account for the mind. I can't just say turn your mind off. I have to facilitate an environment where you think, oh, okay, my mind accepts this. My mind accepts this story, and I'm willing to go a little bit further. Because what the little bit further is you've got to create an environment that's non-threatening. So we didn't even talk about biology. You've got to create an environment that's non-threatening to the mind so that the mind can settle, because the mind is directly connected to the biology, and the biology is directly related to making sure you're alive and healthy and safe. And so if I'm saying a whole lot of stuff that really triggers you and like, oh, this is BS and this is garbage, then I can't actually get you to the place I want to get you, which is the place of present tense awareness. And so all of these things have to be palatable to your mind, or else you'll be triggered. And that's what we experience with teaching veterans this stuff, is that we can't go in with high intellect like that and say, here's this, because mostly people just be like, oh, whatever, dude, blah, blah, blah. So instead we go in with, let's talk about marksmanship. Let's talk about the things that that you understand. And then the mind is cool. The mind's like, all right, let's do that. And so the mind does that. And then we start to explain that, hey, look, this is not the only thing that's going on. And we start to explain the mind in its proper place, as opposed to the mind as the dominant aspect of human experience. And when that starts to happen, the mindfulness starts to become kind of a readily available perspective. So once mindfulness becomes a readily available perspective, it can be turned into soft power. And by that, I mean, you now get to choose inside a moment, like I did with the racism. So you get to choose inside the moment of listening to someone describe an experience that is directly connected to racism, and listening to the fact that your own head is creating arguments for why this person's lived experience is not actually what they say it is. You know better. I know what his lived experience is, not him. So you get to experience that. That's what your mind can create. And then you can say to yourself, do I want that to be what I take from this? Is that really is that really what I want to take from this experience? I don't think so. And then this is what happens. This is where soft becomes really powerful. When you start to make that decision, then it becomes more evident at any given moment that choice is available all the time. And what's so cool about it being available all the time is that you will inevitably come across the fact that all the stuff in our past, all the relationship to religion, all the relationship to body, all the relationship to mind, isn't a path towards perfection or whatever. It's just different epochs of how we've experienced what all is in human experience. And so it's not we got over the body and got to the mind, so forget the body. It's not we got over the mind and we got to religion, so forget the mind. It's not we got over the mind, the body, and the spirit to get to mindfulness, so forget it all. That's not it. It can be, like you can go down the Buddhist path. The Buddhist path is to see everything as it is in the illusory, as an illusion, and to see that nothing has any real value because it's all only real because we perceive of it. And so that's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is you could start to participate with life with a greater sense of, curiosity and wonder and um, just a sense of excitement. And this is the thing that you inevitably come across as you start to participate with mindfulness and you turn it into soft power. And that's that life is so full of things that you just can't help but notice and say, huh, that was uncanny. That was so amazing. That was amazing. That was wonderful. Maybe I'm not alone. Maybe life is interacting with me. Maybe this is something that I'm participating with, not something I'm just struggling through. And when that happens the first time and you kind of interact with life as a partner as opposed to something to dominate, it really feels exciting. And the notion of your best self and what that represents becomes that much more meaningful. And it's kind of like, huh, so if I'm in awareness more often, and if I'm attentive to all the thoughts that I typically have, especially the grand narrative, and I start to kind of choose what thoughts have the most relevance to me and what don't, and I start to see how that impacts my body, and I start to recognize how the world around me kind of interacts with that. Then there's just this feeling of, huh, huh. And so for me, what has happened is as I've practiced mindfulness and I've really turned it into a soft power, it's like, well, okay, where do I take this? Where do I take this power? What do I do with this soft power? And I think the things that you do are you share it. You share it with other people. And especially share it with people that are struggling or people that are suffering. That's compassion. Because the thing about soft power is that it's a sustainable type of power that is incredibly powerful. Hard power is powerful and it can be incredibly powerful, but it's very unsustainable. It just has this there's just no staying power. It typically gets dirty and corrupted and it's just a disaster over time. But soft power is arguably the power that all religions articulate as our highest kind of form or highest capabilities. And so when you get into the realm of compassion, where it's, you're taking your soft power into conflict, into suffering, and you start to recognize that the power holds up, man, it's just the coolest thing. It's really the coolest thing. So, I've been at this for a while now, and I'm ready for some coffee, and I know you're tired too. So let's just quickly go through the practice. I'm not going to do the bells and just guide you through a mindful moment, and we'll finish up. But any more questions, please feel free to ask them. I'll respond to them with the next lesson, right? So it amazes me how this stuff fits all together, and I have, of course, thoughts in my head like, oh, you're just putting this, you're finding connections where you want them, which is true and not true at the same time. So here's 72. Protectors of the world and guardians of the ways of gods and Buddhas. The techniques of peace enable us to meet every challenge. That's some language for you right there. Protectors of the world and guardians of the ways of gods and Buddhas. The techniques of peace enable us to meet every challenge. So that's 72. Doesn't mean that life's easy, right? Doesn't mean that everything's going to be, smooth to figure this stuff out. It just means that you have capabilities that you didn't realize you have, and you have limitations within your capabilities that you can account for in ways that you probably didn't realize. So anyway, just notice where you are. Slow down a little bit. If you want, you can close your eyes. Notice what's beneath you, your ground. Notice your pelvis, your core, your heart space, your throat, top of your head. Just take a couple rounds of full inhale, full exhale. What are you grateful for? And is there anybody that's struggling or suffering that you want to put in your heart, focus on? And then when you're ready to finish, 2 rounds of inhale and exhale, and your second exhale ends the practice. Make sure you drink water today. Drink a crap ton of water today, and I guarantee you'll sleep a little bit better tonight. Now you'll pee a lot, but that's okay. It's good for you. Thanks for watching, y'all. Talk to you soon.